Hey, welcome to Adventure Bound Off-Road. My name is Alfred, and behind me is my 04 Jeep TJ. Today we're going through one of the issues that I've had with my Jeep, and that's dealing with the disconnects. If you ever dealt with disconnects in the past, then you know that anytime you get off a smooth surface, so anything that's like a dirt road or uneven, you'll notice that it's difficult to get those disconnects to disconnect and then also to reconnect. So today I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to fix that issue, and hopefully it can help you out in the future as well.
The quick disconnects I currently have installed on my Jeep are made by a company called JKS. The way they work is that you'll remove the bottom retaining pin and pull the link off the bottom post, and then you would swing it up and store it on the post on the frame. With the sway bar disconnected, there's no longer anything tying the axle back to the frame. What this allows is more articulation because now the axle doesn't have to fight the rotational tension of the sway bar. Here I'm going to demonstrate one of the downsides of this type of disconnect. I'm going to drive my Jeep on this 4-inch block of wood, and this is going to simulate a high point on the road. With the axle being uneven, I can still get one link to reconnect. The issue is going to be that since the other side of the axle is higher, that swings the sway bar up. And in order to reconnect it, you have to find a more level surface or try and push down on the bumper to try and get the pin to line back up. The solution that I found that will allow for quicker disconnects and reconnects is this sway bar system from Teraflex. Lifted vehicles have more leverage on the sway bar system, so Teraflex designed this bar to have a stiffer rate over what the factory one would have came with. These 3 arms coming off the sway bar are truly the heart of the system, and I'll show you later on how they operate.
So I got a Motobilt bumper on my Jeep, but the hardware locations are going to be exactly the same. There's going to be 2 hooks on a stock Jeep with a stock bumper. And it's 2 bolts on each side, and then there's also going to be 2 holes in the bottom going into the front cross member. And with all the hardware out, now we're free to move this bumper forwards to get access to the bolts for the sway bar.
The forward bolt was easy to get to in an impact, but because the rear bolt is directly underneath the grill,
so using a ratcheting wrench is perfect for this. With the factory sway bar removed, we can now slide the bumper back onto the frame and reinstall the hardware. The new sway bar won't utilize any of these locations for mounting. Here are the bushings that are going to be installed into the front crossmember of the frame. Here I'm applying a synthetic grease to help aid in the installation. The purpose of these bushings is that it supports and locates the sway bar back onto the Jeep's frame. Prior to installing the bushings, I went ahead and used a rotary tool to clean out any of the rust or debris that was inside the tube of the front crossmember. Installation of the bushings isn't that hard, but it does require some solid hits with a dead blow hammer. To install the sway bar, we have to remove the forward bolt that secures the steering box onto the Jeep's frame. The factory bolt sticks out too far, so Teraflex supplies the bolt to replace it. During the bolt's removal, it became difficult to turn. I used some penetrating oil to try and aid in the removal. I let it sit for a little bit and the bolt backed out with no issue. Here's the bolt, and as you can tell from the end of the threads, you can see the corrosion build up. Here are the new bolts applied by Teraflex. Here I apply some red Loctite and reinstall the bolt back into the steering box. With the factory sway bar and the JKS disconnects no longer being utilized, I go back and remove the remaining of the old hardware. To aid in installation, I install as many components onto the sway bar while still on the workbench. Here I am adjusting the spacing collar. Next I grab the arm for the passenger side. Using a chisel, I open up the splines. Opening up these splines will allow an easier engagement onto the splines of the sway bar. Going back through and using a dead blow hammer, I fully seat the arm onto the sway bar. Next we grab the side end cap. This will index into the recess of the sway bar. The purpose of this slotted end cap and bolt is that it will prevent the arm from being pulled off the splines of the sway bar. Using a little bit of red Loctite, we install the bolt and torque it down. Now we turn back to the Jeep and apply grease on the inside of those bushings that we previously installed. The fitment between the sway bar and the bushings is really tight, so the grease is going to help aid with the installation. Initially I tried using my dead blow hammer to try and get the sway bar to pass all the way through the bushing. This proved to be very difficult. Luckily for me, I had access to an air hammer. What I did is I found a socket that fit over the end of the bolt on the end of the sway bar and used a punch to hammer on the back side of the impact socket. Utilizing the air hammer still proved to be a slow process, but I would take this over trying to hit a bunch of times with a dead blow hammer for sure. And with a little time and effort, we were able to get the sway bar to be pressed through the bushings.
Alright, looks like we ran into a little bit of a problem installing the sway bar. So let me show you guys what I'm currently dealing with. Alright, so here's the issue that I'm currently running with. I installed this little L bracket and this arm, and when they're installed together, that is the pin that locks the sway bar together to give you your good road manners. But the issue is that this bar is in a very downward angle, and I'm almost afraid that just normal driving or even articulating with the bar connected, that I might have the possibility of inverting the bar.
The other issue, well, I could raise this up, but the issue is going to be is that this L bracket is going to interfere with the bumper when it's disconnected, because what happens when it disconnects is that this knob turns out and allows these two bars to rotate freely. So this side looks like it's going to clear just fine, but this L bracket is going to articulate up into the bumper. So it's looking like I'm going to have to trim the bumper back a little bit to allow this that inner arm to actually be able to have a range of motion to it. Utilizing the masking tape, I tape off the general area where that L arm should sit while at right height. This is just going to be a guideline of the area I need to cut out with the grinder. My original cuts in the bumper get the arms to be pretty close. What I do now is take the outside arm and use its profile to give me a mark on the bumper. And from this mark, I'll take a die grinder and make the profile that I need for the clearance. Alright, so I think we're almost there. As you can see, I took away from the bumper, and I think we're almost there. I think if I take about 1/4 inch off from this arm, it should be about perfect for the way the arms are going to articulate. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this little this nub right here. I'm just going to keep the radius tight, and then we'll test it again and see where we're at. With the bumper clearances figured out, we installed the locking pin. This is what allows the sway bar to be disconnected and reconnected. Now we're going to go back and install the hardware into the sway bar arms. These tie in down and lock the splines further from the arm onto the sway bar. The final component that needs to be installed are the sway bar links. Here I'm installing it in the second hole from the end. This is going to be my initial setup point, and then I'll adjust either back or forwards depending on how I like the ride. And that pretty much wraps it up for the installation of the Teraflex sway bar for the TJ. The reason why I went with this style of sway bar instead of, let's say, like a torsion bar, kind of like a Currie Antirock, is that the Currie Antirock only gives you a single rate, meaning that that's the same rate you would use on-road as you would be off-road. The good thing about that would be you don't have to do anything. It's always there. It's as in you don't have to get out and disconnect because you already have a light torsion bar. What you lose though, what you sacrifice is that that light rate on the road, you'll feel it a lot in the corners, especially a little bit of a higher vehicle with taller tires as well, and especially on a short wheelbase. Anytime you take a corner, you'll feel that body roll into the corners.
So the reason why I went with the Teraflex sway bar is that it has a higher rate sway bar than what stock would have been. And also gives you the option of taking the knob and disconnecting it and allowing the arms to articulate separate of each other. That's good because even though it's just one knob now, so you can get out, disconnect relatively quick. Once you get back on the road, you can reconnect the sway bar and you have actually a good driving vehicle. And installation of the sway bar should be pretty easy. The only thing I had issues with is since I have a Motobilt front bumper, is I had to clearance that one corner out to allow that arm to actually articulate. I am going to have to forklift, and I'm just going to flex it out just to make sure that I do have enough clearance. And then hopefully this weekend I'll be hitting the trails. And again, I'm Alfred, the Venture Bound Off-Road, and thanks for watching.